You mentioned that when you were growing up, Carmel wasn't particularly affluent.
No, we all had modest jobs. I mean, our parents did, and everybody worked. And no, I don't know. John Fortier, his father was a druggist. Maybe that was thinking of other people. And then Walters had the farm. And Ron Stoney's dad, he was in a building trade, I forget which one. And I think Barbara Livingston's dad was with the telephone company.
So how did it evolve?
Then I went around town. Another thing, how to pay bills. Periodically, my mother would give me a bunch of envelopes, or sometimes not even envelopes, but a paper clip, which was invented by a Norwegian, by the way. And I'd go to see Mr. Weir, who was Dick Weir's father, and I'd pay the power bill, and then I'd go to the drugstore and walk all over town. And then when I got the paper out and started, getting my $19 a month, my mother said we need to have a Social Security number and so on, and went to the Bank of Carmel, and I think his name was Abercrombie, but I'm not sure. Any rate, she took me back to the bank VP, or president, I guess he was, and showed me how to write a check. And so that was an experience.
So how did Carmel evolve from a not particularly affluent community to what is now perceived as a pretty substantial?
It was after the war that there's a book that you both should read called Our Kids by Robert Putnam. It was published last May, and it goes through what's happened in the U.S., and it happened in a little town he grew up in the shore of Lake Erie, and why we're quite segregated now in income. And it's an excellent read. The book's about that thick, but about that much of it is citing all the studies that have been done. But Carmel was found, and a big thing in Carmel, I should say, for us boys, was when the Piedmont girls would come down. Easter vacation, the kids from up in Piedmont would always come to Carmel. In fact, Helen Breck, who's here now, Helen, she was one of those that came down. She always dreamed of living in Carmel, and she and Bo had a house. Bo died, and then she realized she was in Dolores in around 10th or so, that none of her neighbors are permanent. None. So she's now in a condo at Coyle. It's nice to have neighbors, which we had. So as things started growing, people got cars. We used to travel to San Francisco by train. I remember going up to Oregon during the war. My dad had hurt his back at Joe Mora's place. He and Joe Mora were friends, odd combination, but Joe Mora was out in Pebble Beach. Anyway, he broke his back, and that's when I was about 4 or 5. So we would walk with pedometers from 5th and Dolores to the hospital, which was a new hospital, out by the high school. It's not there anymore. The building is there. That was what you got in Jack Armstrong. Somehow or another, it would click off the miles you were walking. But he couldn't go in the service, so he worked at an Air Force base in Alaska during the war. So we were going up to see him in Bellingham. And so we took the train to San Francisco, the train ferry over to Oakland, and then continued on. But then with the war ending, people had cars, and that's the problem with California is we developed after the automobile. We don't have good public transportation. But then it was the gravy years. Your home started appreciating, and there were jobs galore. Everybody was going up, and in that book I'm mentioning, it is sort of like after the Depression, and then the Second World War, and then going into the 50s. But beginning in the late 60s, society has changed. But anyway, as far as Carmel, that's when people started buying houses. In fact, one guy a year behind me, he became a lawyer up in Oakland. Anyway, he had enough money to start buying houses in Carmel, and he'd rent them out because a lot of people would want to rent them, and the rent would pay his fees. He had, I don't know if it's exaggerated, something like 40 homes.